Hello and welcome everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna continue the series Naruto the Zombie Ninja Part 2. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more fanfiction like this, please subscribe to the channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Tsunade ran her hand through the brilliant blonde locks of the 15-year-old boy lying still in his hospital bed 10 years ago. Another boy lay in the room next door, being watched over by a pink-haired girl with an expression similar to Tsunade's as she ran her fingers through her jet-black hair. The boys had finally met 2 days before after their only real fight 3 years before. Their first fight had ended in tragedy, with the blonde injured and unconscious and the dark-haired boy missing. They trained for 3 years, and no one knew the extent of their abilities except their sensei, 2 of the 3 legendary Sannin. Since Orochimaru's first attack on the village, Konoha had been on high alert for years. Naruto and Jiraiya had only been back in the village for a week when Orochimaru's giant snakes invaded and sound ninjas attacked. The first reports of the attack reached Tsunade while she was discussing Naruto's training with him. Genma teleported into her office, a toothpick dangling precariously from his mouth, explaining that 2 of their gates had been breached. She told him to tell the Chunin that their first priority was to get the villagers to safety and have the Jounin defend the gates. Genma had only just left when the Hokage tower began to shake. Naruto, Tsunade had called as the building shifted erratically. Her first thought was to shield the boy. In an instant, the 15-year-old leapt from his position in front of the desk, grabbing her and leaping out the window as the tower collapsed. They helped her to her feet as they watched the tower collapse, clouds of smoke rising as the rubble landed. Naruto, Tsunade, Jiraiya called out, dashed to their sides. They could hear the man laugh before they saw him. They'd recognized the Kukuku anywhere. A massive snake slithered into view, its tail wrapped around what used to be the base of the tower, the end carelessly flicking. 2 ninjas were standing on its head. They could see them clearly after the smoke cleared. Although his face was still quite young, the taller of the 2 had white hair. The glare of the sun off his glasses obscured his eyes, but everyone recognized Kabuto. The shorter figure laughed once more. It's been quite some time, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Naruto. It was Sasuke's face and body, but the gravely voice coming from his lips was Orochimaru's. Naruto clenched his fists and hung his head. He had arrived too late. Tsunade-sama, exclaimed a voice. 5 Anbu appeared out of nowhere between her and Orochimaru. Go, she exclaimed. I don't need your protection. Please assist the villagers. The Anbu paused before quickly bowing and walking into various parts of the village. Let's call it a day, Orochimaru. Jiraiya phoned. Yes, Orochimaru confirmed. It's about time. Tsunade braced herself for battle. She'd been looking forward to this moment for a long time. Stay back, Naruto, she said, cracking her knuckles. Not a chance, Tsunade-baba, he grumbled. Naruto, you can't defeat him, she sobbed. Jiraiya's rough voice cut in. Tsunade, leave him to fight. He could be killed. Jiraiya, Tsunade, exclaimed the white-haired man angrily. He will not fight alone. She exhaled a sigh. Take care, Naruto. Don't be concerned, the blonde growled. Tsunade-sama, said a smooth voice. Kabuto stood about 20 feet in front of them. While I would prefer to fight Naruto-kun in order to repay him for our previous meeting, Orochimaru-sama has requested that I fight you. Tsunade looked at Naruto, expecting him to say something loud and brash to Kabuto, and was surprised to see him standing with his arms crossed, staring at him with a disinterested expression. His 3 years of training had undoubtedly calmed him down, she reasoned. Tsunade said to him, I still owe you for our last fight. Your cheap blood tricks aren't going to work this time. When she charged at him, their fight began. I guess it's our turn, Jiraiya, Orochimaru said through Sasuke's mouth. Jiraiya bit his thumb angrily, drawing blood. Naruto placed a hand on the older man's arm as he recognized the seals he was performing. Iro Sennin, summoning Gamabunta will destroy half the village before the fight is over. Kukuku, laughed someone above them. It appears that the brat has lost some of his brashness over the years. Naruto and Jiraiya both looked up at him. Orochimaru, Naruto sobbed. I swear I'll kill you before the end of the day. He laughed once more. However, he's not much smarter, is he? Naruto and Jiraiya leapt to a building and onto the snake's head, while Jiraiya ran up the snake's body, using chakra to stick to the snake's scaly skin. Orochimaru attacked with his tongue, which flew from Sasuke's mouth, almost making Naruto sick. Naruto ignored the sensation and flipped away from the tongue, which arced towards Jiraiya. The man with the long hair dodged. He turned his gaze to Sasuke's, no, Orochimaru's, bandaged arms. If he could only get close. The tongue was too long for close-range combat. Naruto, he exclaimed. After 3 years of training, The boy knew exactly what he wanted and acted quickly. Kage Bushin isn't right. 50 Narutos suddenly surrounded Orochimaru and rushed him with a loud battle cry. Orochimaru laughed as he used his tongue to fight them off. Still weak, he said as he watched them go up in smoke. His eyes widened in surprise as one Naruto managed to get in close with a kunai in his hand. "What?" he exclaimed, as the orange-clad boy transformed into Jiraiya with a puff of smoke. "A henge?" inquired Orochimaru. Jiraiya lunged at Orochimaru, raising the kunai. Jiraiya made the fatal error of assuming his arms were still useless. As Sasuke's face twisted into a manic grin, he looked shocked. Orochimaru grabbed Jiraiya's wrist, bringing the kunai to a halt inches away from his face. "You're still as dumb as ever, Jiraiya." Jiraiya tried to pull his arm away from him, but Orochimaru stopped him. Jiraiya watched with wide eyes as Orochimaru focused his chakra on his left hand. Naruto was well versed in that skill. Haku's face suddenly appeared in front of him. "Do you have a special someone in your life, Iro-senin?" he exclaimed, leaping into the air as Orochimaru's fist flew forward. It happened so quickly that no one could react for a long time. Sakura had been looking for a place where she could be of most assistance. Since Sasuke had fled and Naruto had been training, she no longer had her genin team. She had also been training for 3 years under Tsunade supervision. As she wanted to do what she could as a medical nin, despite the fact that her skills were not as advanced as Tsunade or Sama's Shizyun's. She jumped onto a roof to get a better view of the chaos and attempted to determine who was in the most immediate need of assistance. She was unprepared for what she saw in front of her. The silence that had descended on Jiraiya and Orochimaru was broken by a loud scream of Naruto. Sakura stood on the roof next to them, wide-eyed and horrified. Sasuke stood on the head of a massive snake, one hand immobilizing Jiraiya's wrist sands and the other thrusting through Naruto's right shoulder. Naruto coughed, splattering blood on Sasuke's white-wrapped arms. Sasuke appeared to recover from his surprise and began laughing. What was the matter with his voice? Jiraiya fixed his gaze on the hand in front of him. Naruto's hand had gone straight through his chest, the hand that was supposed to be his. Orochimaru's fingers bled, and blood ran down his orange jacket. Orochimaru let go of Jiraiya's hand and braced his free hand against the boy's chest, unceremoniously pulling his fist out of him. Jiraiya snatched Naruto up as he crumpled. "Naruto!" Tsunade sobbed on the ground. She attempted to rush for him but was stopped by Kabuto. "You're not finished yet, Tsunade-sama. Get out of my way," she screamed, but had to dodge as he focused his chakra on his hands and lunged, attempting to cut her muscles. "Are you all right, Iro-senin?" In a soft voice, the boy in Jiraiya's arms inquired. He coughed up a little more blood. The older man couldn't understand how he could even talk. "Ibaka, Naruto, what made you do that?" Jiraiya inquired, her eyes wide with horror. "I don't want to see those I care about die in front of my eyes." Neither of them noticed Orochimaru's eyes light up at the words. He shook his head, as if to clear his thoughts. Orochimaru began to laugh as Naruto faded from consciousness. "It appears that all of your students die, Jiraiya." Jiraiya's hands began to shake in frustration. He jumped to the roof Sakura was standing on and gently laid Naruto down before turning and leaping back to the snake's head, ready to end this. "My host doesn't seem too pleased with me," Orochimaru joked. "There's a lot of commotion in the back corner of my mind where his consciousness resides. Does he still exist within you?" Jiraiya inquired, surprised. "Don't get too sentimental, Jiraiya. He'll be trapped there indefinitely." Jiraiya groaned. As a result, there was no way to save Sasuke. If there had been one, he would have died trying. Naruto would have wanted it. "Sharingan," said Orochimaru. Jiraiya clenched his teeth as red eyes pierced him. On the roof, tears streamed down Sakura's cheeks as she tried everything Tsunade had ever taught her to save Naruto. He wasn't yet dead, but the wound, the blood, was. As she worked, she could feel his heart rate slowing and her hands glowing with chakra. "Naruto, please be patient." There were loud crashes, and she looked up, wide-eyed, as Sasuke and Jiraiya threw jutsu after jutsu at each other. She had never witnessed a battle with such skill. Not even the battle between Kakashi and Zabuza. The slow heartbeat beneath her fingers came to a halt. "Naruto." She poured more chakra into him, desperate to restart his heart. "No," she sobbed, trying yet again. Standing up quickly, she saw that Sasuke had thrown Jiraiya with such force that he'd crashed into the building, shaking it before the older man fell motionless to the ground. Tsunade was still fighting Kabuto, albeit with a noticeable limp. Smoke rose from every direction in the village. Buildings collapsing were punctuated by screams, and bodies and blood littered the ground from where she stood on the roof. She looked down at the blood on her hands before shifting her gaze to Naruto, who lay motionless on the ground. She had fallen short. She clenched her fists and turned to face Sasuke, who had begun to laugh as he watched the destruction of Konoha. She stood back up after kneeling and kissing Naruto on the forehead, pulling a kunai from her thigh pouch. She knew she wasn't strong enough. Sasuke had beaten Jiraiya-san, but she had to act. She would not flee even if it meant her death. Two great red eyes peered out of the darkness deep within a dying boy. "Oh, no," the eye's owner said, almost amused. "This will not do. Kit, you're going to regret this one day." The boy's heart had slowed to the point of appearing to stop, but Kyuubi knew better. This kid survived solely on willpower, but it was sufficient. The hole in the blonde boy's shoulder began to heal, just as it had 3 years before, with red chakra swirling around his body. "Sasuke-kun," Sakura yelled. The raven-haired boy raised an eyebrow at her. "You assassinated him. Naruto was murdered by you." Sasuke let out a terrifying laugh. "And so he died." As Sakura stood there watching, his eyes widened and flashed, and his hands flew to his head as if in pain. He came to a halt and straightened up, a manic grin on his face. "Oh my goodness, you're enraged. What did he mean to you?" he said. Sakura was perplexed. Sasuke didn't appear to be speaking to her. "You're a traitor, Sasuke. You will never be forgiven." She sobbed and raised her kunai. Tsunade finally managed to land a chakra-infused punch to Kabuto's chest. She was able to knock him out by sending her chakra to specific points on his body. He wouldn't get out of bed for at least a week. She took a look around and noticed the critical situation. She almost gasped when she saw Sakura arm herself. "Sakura," she exclaimed. "No, that is not Sasuke. You will not be able to defeat him." The pink-haired girl either didn't hear her or ignored her before charging at Orochimaru. "Don't kid yourself, girl," Orochimaru said, approaching her and backhanding her away. She flew off the snake's head due to the force of the hit. "Sakura," Tsunade screamed as she saw her apprentice start to fall from 50 feet in the air. She couldn't get to her in time. She couldn't even walk. A flash of orange and red whizzed by, leaping into the air and catching the young woman mid-fall. Tsunade was taken aback as Naruto appeared in front of her, gently placing Sakura, who had passed out, on the ground. He dashed away, only to return a few moments later with the limp Jiraiya over his shoulder, placing him next to Sakura. Tsunade was unable to speak. Naruto's horrifying wound had vanished, leaving only a large rip in his jacket as evidence. He was surrounded by red chakra, and his features resembled those of a fox. His eyes were bloodshot and narrowed, his teeth were long and fang-like, and his nails had grown into claws. "Tsunade Baba, heal them. This will be handled by me." As he walked away, she exclaimed, "Naruto, I'll be fine," he said, glancing over his shoulder at her with a vicious grin. She sighed as she gazed at Jiraiya's battered form. She began to heal him by placing her palms on his chest while keeping her gaze fixed on Naruto. The boy jumped back up to the snake's head, his arms crossed, staring down Orochimaru. "Are you still alive? Reports of my death have greatly exaggerated," Naruto muttered. "The fox has appeared. At the very least, you'll be a fun fight now." Orochimaru laughed and then paused, his eyes distant. "Your friend appears to want you to flee. He appears to be very fond of you. When you were declared dead, I became very emotional." The news of Sasuke's awakening had been spread in order to shock and surprise Naruto, and hopefully weaken him. He wouldn't harm Sasuke's body if he thought the boy could be returned to it. Orochimaru was surprised to say the least when Naruto heard this, and his lips twisted into a feral grin, fangs showing menacingly. You can tell him that by now he should know that Uzumaki Naruto never flees. I'm still weak from having his hand rammed through my chest, and I'm devoting most of my energy right now to preventing Kyuubi from taking over my body and killing everyone who isn't already dead. So, if he truly wants me to live, he'd better reclaim his body, because I'm not going to win, but I'm not going to run. Ku, laughed Orochimaru. "At the very least, you're realistic," he said. "You're not going to win this." He began charging the Chidori. "This seems like a fitting way for you to die, as if Sasuke is ramming his hand through your heart." Naruto remained silent. Jiraiya awoke to find Tsunade hovering over him, concerned. "Naruto," he exclaimed as he sat up. He's alive." "Jiraiya," Tsunade announced quickly, pointing up to the two possessed boys. They saw Orochimaru power up Chidori and start running at Naruto, who stood firm with his arms crossed. "He's not dodging," Tsunade exclaimed. Jiraiya attempted to get up to go to him, but he was too weak to stand. He screamed from his knees, "Naruto, dodge!" But Naruto remained motionless. Tsunade and Jiraiya watched in awe as Orochimaru drew closer, and the Chidori suddenly went out like a candle being snuffed. Orochimaru knelt, his hands gripping Sasuke's hair. A piercing scream escaped his lips. "This can't be happening," he cried, then his voice changed tone, not gentler, but with a younger, less gravelly quality to it. Naruto recognized the voice. It was slightly deeper than the last time he heard it, but it was the same voice. "Get out of my body," he yelled. There was a surge of power and an outraged scream, and as they watched the chakra swirl up around Sasuke's body, they saw the shadowy shape of a human being pulled from the boy's chest. It appeared to be trying to hang on, but it was yanked away from his body and vanished. Sasuke collapsed to all fours, panting. The raven-haired boy raised his head, his red eyes having faded to a deep gray. He noticed the blonde above him, surrounded by red chakra. "Naruto?" he inquired. The blonde managed to stop the red chakra with what appeared to be considerable difficulty, and when he opened his eyes again, they were the bright blue Sasuke was used to. Naruto looked down at him with a smile. "Sasuke," he introduced himself. "I knew you could pull it off." With that, he collapsed, no longer able to stand without the Kyuubi's strength. Sasuke moved quickly, with energy he didn't realize he had left, to catch the boy as he fell, gently cradling him. "Naruto?" he asked, lightly shaking him. "Naruto." The snake they were standing on became impatient without his summoner and vanished with a poof. Sasuke jumped to the roof next to him, then to the ground, with nothing under his feet. He couldn't go any further and sat heavily, still holding the blonde close and rocking back and forth. When Tsunade and Jiraiya arrived, he was crying and mumbling into Naruto's hair, "Gomen Nasai. Gomen Nasai." It took a sleep jutsu for him to release his grip on the boy. Naruto awoke in the hospital 3 days later. Except for Tsunade and Jiraiya, no one knew about his condition, not even Kakashi or Iruka, who came by every day only to be told they couldn't get any information about either of their former students. Sasuke was still unconscious, his body still recovering from the strain of being possessed. Orochimaru was presumed dead, his soul having nowhere to go after Sasuke defeated him. Tsunade had hugged Naruto tightly when he awoke, relieved that he was okay. She let him go when he didn't return her hug. "Tsunade Baba," he said softly, his gaze fixed on his hands. It nearly took over at that point. "Naruto?" she inquired, concerned. "Kyuubi," he said before pausing. "I've never been so close to losing my mind. The power, the killing intent. Everyone in the village would have died if I had caved for even a second. I was almost powerless to stop him. However, Naruto, you stopped him. He's been trying more frequently," the boy observed. What? I'm constantly aware of him poking around in my mind. "Tsunade, he waits until I'm relaxed, until I'm caught off guard, usually when I'm sleeping. Then he tries to seize control. He wishes to leave." Tsunade was taken aback by the news. Why hadn't Naruto told her before? She took a swallow. This was a difficult progression. "You can fight him, Naruto," she said finally. "What happens if I am unable to? I can't take that risk. He told me I'd regret it if he saved my life. Tsunade, I can already feel him. He took advantage of my vulnerability and woven himself deeper into me. He's just below the surface right now. He's attempting to unite us." Tsunade was at a loss for words. She was the Hokage, but she was at a loss for what to do. This was a problem with no obvious solutions. Naruto went on. "I'm going to have to leave the village." "What?" exclaimed Tsunade. "I won't be able to come if Kyuubi takes over. I will not jeopardize the lives of those I care about. If you leave, you'll be considered a missing nin," Tsunade warned. "There has to be a way." "Tsunade Baba," he reasoned. He begged. Jiraiya, in the end, had the brilliant idea of informing everyone that Naruto had died. No one knew what was wrong with him. It wouldn't be a stretch to say he died as a result of his injuries. Naruto had refused the older man's invitation to accompany the boy. Both Sanin and I wondered how he planned to conceal himself, because his appearance makes him stand out quite a bit. But he'd tied his Hitai-8 over his telltale blonde locks and pulled a mask over his wicker marks, leaving only his blue eyes, which didn't seem to shine as brightly as they used to. When he appeared in front of them one last time, his face and hair covered and dressed in navy blue and black instead of his usual bright orange jumpsuit, they had to admit he was unrecognizable. He had turned to Tsunade before leaving. "Tsunade-sama," he introduced himself. Both Sanin were taken aback by his respectful tone and name. "Please do not punish Sasuke. Please." She had nothing to say, but "I won't." He then vanished with a nod and a wave, leaving Tsunade to inform everyone who cared about him of his death. Sasuke rolled over again, this time laying on his back and staring up at the ceiling of his room, as if it were the source of his inability to sleep. He'd come so close. He was so close to finding the answers he'd been looking for since Naruto's return. That's why I've been pretending to be dead for the past 10 years. Naruto was about to continue when he heard a loud knock at Sasuke's door. Naruto immediately froze. Sasuke noticed a difference. Naruto stood up, pulling himself into a sitting position. He drew Sasuke to his feet by offering his hand to the dark-haired man. The knocking became more obnoxious. They could hear Uchiha-san from the other side of the door. Naruto exited the kitchen and down the hallway of Sasuke's one-story house, not looking back at Sasuke. With a sigh, Sasuke watched him walk into the guest room across from his room. Stalking to the door, he yanked it open with more force than he intended, icily glaring at the visitor. Two jounin were standing on his doorstep. The person who had been knocking and calling his name was unfamiliar to Sasuke. He was probably in his 20s. The jounin behind him stood a few feet away, a disinterested expression on his face. Shino, Sasuke reasoned, was the only other man he knew who could maintain an expression as impassive and indifferent as his own. Actually, he corrected himself, Shino was probably better at it than he was, because Sasuke's expression could range from angry to surprised on occasion. Shino rarely raised an agitated eyebrow. He was now standing with his hands in his pockets and round sunglasses over his eyes. Uchiha-san, said the first jounin, we were patrolling when we noticed a large surge of chakra coming from your house. We wanted to make certain that everything was in order. Sasuke almost snorted with laughter. Shino appeared unconcerned while the young jounin appeared extremely anxious. He appeared to be bored. Everything's fine, Sasuke said, glaring angrily at the jounin. He took a breather. Chidori practice, in your house, inquired the young man. He'd heard stories about Chidori's destructive power. When Shino made the effort to raise an eyebrow, Sasuke knew the lie was bad. He crossed his arms and glared at both of them, deciding that the best path to take was the one that worked the most often. How come it's suddenly your concern what I do in my own home? The young jounin looked horrified at having irritated the Anbu. He stumbled over his next words. We just wanted to make sure, sir, that nothing had happened. I believe, sneered Sasuke. Don't you think I'm more than qualified to take care of myself? Yes, sir, stammered the jounin. Shino spoke up, surprising both of them. I apologize for bothering you, Uchiha. He turned and walked away, and the young jounin looked at Sasuke and dashed after him. Sasuke closed the door and went in search of Naruto, shaking his head. He passed the bathroom on his way down the hall to the guest room, and hearing the gentle thrum of the shower, he realized he wouldn't get to talk to him until later. When Naruto returned, he dismissed the entire incident. He either ignored or changed the subject whenever Sasuke brought it up, which was why Sasuke was now tossing and turning in bed at 2 a.m. Sasuke threw off the covers and climbed out of bed, sighing in frustration. He didn't flinch as his bare feet made contact with the cool wooden floor, having grown accustomed to the sensation after so many years. As he padded out of his bedroom, he wore only his shorts and didn't bother putting on a shirt. He had no idea where he was going, but he knew that tossing and turning in bed was not getting him anywhere. As he passed by Naruto's guest room, he couldn't help but notice the faint light glowing under the door. He paused and listened carefully, but there was nothing to indicate Naruto was awake. The door wasn't completely shut, so Sasuke debated slightly opening it to see if Naruto was sleeping. He knew he could simply knock, but he didn't want to wake Naruto if he was sleeping. At least one of them needs to rest. Finally, he caved, quietly pushing the door open just wide enough to peer inside. Naruto sat in the center of the floor, facing the door. The room was softly illuminated by a small lamp sitting on the dresser against the wall to his left. The other man appeared to be in deep thought. Sasuke had to wonder if he ever changed because he was still fully dressed, including his arm wrappings. His face mask had been removed, but his hair was still tied up beneath his hidaite. Sasuke reached for the door handle, preparing to close it without disturbing him. Do you require anything, Sasuke? Naruto said without looking at him. Sasuke was taken aback. I was just wondering if you were awake, he said finally. Naruto did turn to face him at that point. The light from the lamp cast strange shadows across the contours of his face, making it difficult to read his expression. Naruto stood up, and his shadow spanned the room, reminding Sasuke of Shikamaru's Kage Main no Jutsu. I told you I don't sleep much, Naruto said as he turned away from him and sat on the bed in the corner of the room across from the dresser. Well, I figured you'd take advantage of your presence here to get some rest, Sasuke said as he walked through the door. You're not going to get attacked in Konoha. Naruto snorted, surprising Sasuke. I'm not worried about shinobi attacking me, he explained. Then, what? Sasuke inquired, perplexed. Naruto seemed to ponder whether or not to tell him for a long time. Today, Naruto finally started. What occurred in the kitchen? That was unusual. Hyubai was attempting to make a point. When I'm fully aware, he rarely tries to overpower me. Unconsciously, Sasuke had moved further into the room. I lied when I said I only slept for a few hours. I'll sleep for a half hour here and there, but I rarely sleep at all. He strikes when I'm sleeping. It was terrifying the first time I awoke to find him weaving his essence through me. I had to use everything I had to push him away. Every time he does it, a little more of him merges with me. Is he attempting to merge with you? Not trying, Naruto said, his blue eyes haunted when he looked up at Sasuke in the dim light. Shaking his head, Sasuke said. Don't be stupid, dope, he said, refusing to believe Naruto's words could be true. Naruto growled at him, and even Sasuke had to admit that the sound wasn't entirely human. I'm not stupid, he snarled. It's not my imagination, and I'm not worried for naught. He averted his gaze, refusing to look at Sasuke. He finally said, forget it. I was naive to believe that the great Uchiha Sasuke would understand. The words made Sasuke's stomach clench. Naruto had opened up to him, and he had squandered the opportunity. He paused before moving over to the bed and taking a seat next to Naruto, who had turned away from him, allowing Sasuke a good view of his profile. Gomen, Naruto. He spent time studying Naruto's features. He never seemed to have much of a chance because the other man kept his mask on as much as possible. Naruto was 12 years old the last time Sasuke saw him. He wasn't exactly trying to get a good look at the boy during their brief battle when they were 15. Naruto had traded his baby fat for muscle. He had a slim, athletic build. His chin and jawline had angularized. Sasuke frowned as he realized he hadn't noticed Naruto's whisker marks had become more prominent. They were darker and wider. How come you never remove your Hidaite? Sasuke inquired. Don't you think my hair would give me away? Naruto said, a small smile on his face. There's only me here, Sasuke reminded him. I understand, Naruto replied quietly. Before Sasuke spoke, there was a long silence. May I look at your hair? Naruto's brow furrowed in surprise as he looked at him. Why? Because I haven't seen it in 10 years and I miss the color. Naruto's eyes widened before he averted his gaze. As I said, it gives me away. I already know who you are, Naruto, Sasuke said. It does not reveal who I am. It reveals who I'm becoming. Sasuke frowned deeply as he spoke. Naruto reached up and began slowly untying his Hidaite. Sasuke stood there silently watching him pull it off. Golden locks fell loosely around his face from the dark cloth. They were longer than the last time Sasuke saw them, and the way they gently framed Naruto's face reminded Sasuke of the fourth Hokage. But Naruto's hair was more than just a different length. He let a few strands of red hair fall through his fingers as he reached out a hand to gently finger the locks. Streaks of fiery red highlights were scattered throughout the blonde strands. He looked at Naruto, who calmly allowed him to stroke his hair. The more we connect, the redder it gets, Naruto explained. It was barely noticeable at first. He lowered his head, almost ashamed of himself. His voice cracked again, and Sasuke could tell he was crying. I'm at a loss for words, Sasuke. I'm powerless to stop him. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. When Naruto began to cry, Sasuke's chest ached. He reached out and drew Naruto to him, holding him while he sobbed into his shoulder, acting entirely on instinct. So, what's the deal with Uchiha? Kiba inquired, leaning back and downing a shot of sake. Kiba was dressed in his Jounin uniform, and the red marks on his cheeks became more pronounced as the alcohol flushed his face. Akamaru sat at his feet under the table, having outgrown his ability to perch on Kiba's head. What exactly do you mean, Kiba? From the seat across from him, Rock Lee inquired. Lee had grown to resemble Guy almost exactly. He wore the same green training suit he had when he was younger, but this time he wore a Jounin vest over it, just like his sensei. The main distinction between the two was Lee's round eyes, which gave him the appearance of eternal innocence. Kiba's explanation was sought by the others at the round table. Since they were old enough to drink, the genin who had taken their first Chunin exam together had been meeting at the bar once a week to catch up on each other's lives. They always sat at a large round table in the back corner of the dark pub, away from the hustle and bustle that surrounded the bar. The group changed from week to week. Some were on missions or had other obligations, but they all came when their schedules allowed. Kiba, Hinata, Choji, Shikamaru, Ino, Lee, and Sakura sat at the table tonight. They knew Kiba wasn't commenting on Sasuke's absence because Sasuke was never present, despite Sakura's best efforts. The moody man had barely spoken to any of them since Naruto's death and Sasuke's return, unless it was in the context of a mission. Shino said there was a strange surge of chakra from his house today, Kiba explained. Shikamaru noticed Sakura and Ino exchanging strange looks. What was that all about? Kiba went on. when he and that new jounin, his what's name, the twitchy one, Ritsu, Choji offered, his mouth full of radish. Yeah, Kiba agreed. They went to check on him and he told him he had been practicing Chidori. At his residence, Inada inquired, her voice soft. She looked the same as she always did. Her hair was still in the same short bob, and the only difference in her outfit was the chunin vest that had replaced her old jacket. Yeah, Kiba said, snorting. I know. Shino also stated that the chakra did not feel like Chidori. It didn't feel like Uchiha's chakra at all. Perhaps it was that guy, Sakura speculated to Ino. Who is he? Lee inquired of the pink-haired woman sitting next to him. Did Shino bring him up? Sakura inquired of Kiba. There's a strange masked man staying with Sasuke-kun. Wow. Uchiha, the self-proclaimed introvert and all-around antisocial jerk, is staying with a stranger, Kiba stated. Sakura shrugged, ignoring Sasuke's insults. She became less delusional as she grew older. That's what he said. But this guy is extremely suspicious. Shikamaru realized how quiet Ino had been up until that point when she finally spoke up. Sakura, you are not suspicious. Scary. Shikamaru's curiosity was piqued when Sakura looked at her sympathetically. What exactly do you mean, Ino? He inquired. Everyone was staring at her with interest. She explained what had happened earlier that day with a sigh. Shikamaru was the type of person who displayed very little emotion simply because changing his expression required too much effort. As a result, when Ino told her story and his eyes widened, everyone at the table found themselves staring at him. How did this guy look? He inquired. Well, we couldn't see his face because he was wearing a mask and his hidaite covered all of his hair. Ino explained. Shikamaru lifted his sake for a drink, nodding and lost in thought. The only thing I noticed about him were his bright blue eyes, Sakura lamented. Shikamaru abruptly stood up after choking on his sake. I have to get going, he said. Shikamaru, looking up at him, Choji said. See you later, he said over his shoulder as he walked out of the bar. What in the world was that about? Kiba inquired as they all stared at the door Shikamaru had just exited. The next morning, Sasuke awoke to the smell of eggs. He sat up and looked around, perplexed, to realize he was in his guest room. He sighed, realizing he'd fallen asleep at some point last night. Naruto had eventually calmed down, and they had moved on from the subject of Kyuubi. They were lying side by side on the bed, telling each other about the events of the previous 10 years. Before entering the kitchen, Sasuke stopped in his room to grab a shirt. Naruto was scrambling eggs at his stove. His mask was down around his neck, and he'd reapplied his hidaite. Hungry? Naruto inquired as Sasuke entered. Yeah, he said, reaching for plates from the cupboard. Sorry, I fell asleep, he apologized, holding the plates as Naruto served the eggs. I didn't expect you to stay up all night just because I do, Naruto said as he replaced the pan of eggs on the stove and took his plate from Sasuke. They had just sat down and started eating when they heard a knock on the door. Naruto smiled. You certainly have a large number of visitors. In frustration, Sasuke set his fork down. I've had more visitors in the last 2 days than I have all year. Naruto laughed as he took another bite of eggs. As Sasuke went to answer the door, he remained in the kitchen. When Sasuke opened the door and saw Shikamaru, he was taken aback. He hardly ever spoke to the journalist, let alone received his visits. Shikamaru, he acknowledged with a nod of his head. Shikamaru introduced himself as Sasuke. I stopped by to see Naruto. It was said so bluntly that Sasuke could only gape at him, his jaw slack. Naruto, who had been listening, poked his head out of the kitchen, still holding his fork and wearing an expression eerily similar to Sasuke's. Ohio, Naruto, Shikamaru said, his gaze shifting from Sasuke to the disembodied head peering out of the kitchen. Naruto smiled as he snapped his mouth shut. Hello, Shikamaru. Naruto and Sasuke sat around Sasuke's kitchen table, staring at Shikamaru as he ate some eggs. So, Sasuke said finally, how did you find out? Ino enters the mind of a strange man with bright blue eyes and discovers that he is harboring something. On the same day, you notice a strange surge of chakra coming from your house, where this guy is staying. It doesn't take a genius to realize this. Naruto smiled. And since you're a genius, it must have come naturally to you. Shikamaru gave a nod. Did you inform anyone else? Sasuke inquired. No, Shikamaru replied. I reasoned that if it hasn't been widely publicized, there must be a reason. Yeah, Naruto agreed. It would be appreciated if you could just keep it to yourself. Shikamaru gave a nod. So why go to the trouble of pretending you're dead? He wondered. Naruto tensed, and Sasuke glared at Shikamaru, who studiously ignored him. It's a long story, Shikamaru, Naruto explained, forcing a smile. Shikamaru looked at him for a moment, and Sasuke had every intention of tossing the journal out if he pressed the subject any further. He would not let Shikamaru upset Naruto after seeing him the night before. Shikamaru, on the other hand, didn't push it, recognizing both Naruto's discomfort and Sasuke's rising rage. Shikamaru may have asked another question, but he was cut off by a puff of smoke above Naruto's head. When the smoke cleared, Sasuke and Shikamaru stared at Naruto's large orange frog. Naruto rolled his eyes upwards, but all he could see were the orange flippers on his brow. Damn Akichi, what did I tell you about popping up without being summoned? He sighed. Big problems, kid, the frog said dismissively. Naruto held his palms out in front of him, allowing Gamakichi to jump into his hands. What's going on? He inquired when the frog turned to face him. Sasuke and Shikamaru noticed his solemn demeanor. Akatsuki is on their way to Konoha, but they are ransacking villages and destroying everything they can. What? Exclaimed Naruto. Based on their movements, their next destination is a small village about 30 miles away. Are you certain? Naruto stated. Gamatatsu has been keeping an eye on them, as you requested. This is their only logical next step, Gamakichi informed him. Naruto gave a nod. How long will it be before they arrive? 4 days at most. That'll be enough time, Naruto said, clearly thinking. Is there enough time for what? Sasuke inquired. To arrive before they do, Naruto responded. He nodded to Gamakichi, who vanished from his grasp. Naruto took a stand. You can't be serious, Sasuke said as he stood up. Well, I'm not joking, Naruto replied. Don't be a moron, Sasuke screamed angrily. You can't defeat Akatsuki all by yourself. Naruto shook his head. I'm going to be fine. You promised to stay, Sasuke reminded him. I never said how long, Naruto shot back. The Hokage has directed that you remain in Konoha. Sasuke moved to close the door. Remember, I'm dead, Sasuke. I'm no longer subject to her rules. Now, if you don't move, I'll crack more than your ribs this time, Naruto said this calmly. Shikamaru, who had been quietly observing the exchange, decided it was time to speak up. Taking on Akatsuki alone would be suicide for Naruto. You must be aware of this. Naruto's attention was drawn to the pony-tailed shinobi, but he said nothing. In fact, he appeared to be a little uneasy. Sasuke then realized what Naruto was thinking. He'd realized it. Naruto charged across the kitchen, raising his fist and punching the whiskered man before he could react. Naruto's head jerked to the side and stayed there, refusing to meet Sasuke's accusatory stare. Don't think like that again, Sasuke yelled angrily. Shikamaru couldn't help but stare at them. The kitchen was deafeningly quiet until Shikamaru spoke up. Perhaps we should discuss this with the Hokage. The two men turned to face him. It's likely she'll dispatch a large team of shinobi to protect the village. It'll also be a good indication of Akatsuki's strength. Naruto sighed and nodded, still not looking Sasuke in the eyes. Sakura hurriedly entered the meeting room. She had only just awoken when Ino knocked on her door, informing her that the Hokage had called an emergency meeting. Sakura had rushed to get ready, frowning. Chunin was not usually present at emergency meetings. Jounin and Anbu frequently went while the Chunin went about their normal village duties. When she entered the meeting hall, it was packed with shinobi who were all talking amongst themselves. She made her way through the crowd, spotting Ino, Lee, and Chaoji. So what's going on? She asked, with a quick hello. They just shrugged. I have no idea, Ino admitted. Kiba, Hinata, and Shino arrived, none of them knowing why they were there. Oh heyo, everyone, said a voice. When they turned around, they saw an Anbu standing behind them. The mask was a rabbit's face with 2 red whiskers painted along the cheeks. They recognized the Anbu right away because her hood was down and 2 black hair buns were visible near the top of her head. Greetings, Tenten. Lee expressed his delight at seeing his old teammate. Tenten removed her mask and smiled at them, her gray eyes twinkling. They could see another Anbu behind Tenten as she moved closer, because he wasn't wearing his robes. His uniform was clearly visible. Long black hair flowed from behind his mask, which resembled a bird. Ohio, Neji Nisan, Hinata said with a bow. Neji gave her a nod. Do you have any idea what's going on? Kiba inquired of the Anbu. No, Tenten said with a shake of her head. Sasuke summoned us, but we haven't been informed of anything. Look, exclaimed a booming voice. It's my old students back together. Gai-sensei, Lee exclaimed excitedly as the green-clad Jounin approached them. Asuma and Kurenai trailed behind him, greeting their former students warmly. Kakashi, my adversary, Gai yelled to the silver-haired Jounin standing across the room. Come see the children. Everyone was looking around at their large group, taking in the strange mix of Chunin, Jounin, and Anbu. Kakashi approached them, his eyes narrowing into a greeting smile. They all fell into easy banter until the Hokage entered the room and silence descended. As Tsunade approached the podium at the front of the room, all the shinobi moved in behind her. The crowd quickly reparted as the Anbu captain, fully robed, strode in after her. He took a seat near the Hokage's advisors, Hamura, Koharu, and Shizune, in the front of the room. Shikamaru entered after Sasuke, walking next to a masked man, which surprised the group of friends. He leaned in and spoke to the man, who nodded. Shikamaru then moved deeper into the crowd and took a seat next to Chaoji. The man remained in the back, casually leaning against the wall. Those who had been in the pub the night before stared straight ahead, not meeting anyone's gaze. "Is that the person?" Kiba spoke quietly to Sakura. She gave a nod. Kiba reached down and absently patted the dog's head as Akamaru whined at his feet. Tsunade spoke, and any thoughts of the masked man vanished. "Information about the Akatsuki has come to light. For the Chunin here, I know you weren't aware of Akatsuki's return, but we felt it was important that you were all informed of the details. We can now confirm that Akatsuki is on his way to Konoha." No one spoke, but there was a collective noise of uneasy shifting from the Chunin, who had been unaware of the threat. Sakura noticed that the masked man hadn't moved from his position against the wall, and he didn't appear surprised at all. "Isn't this brand new information for him? He claimed to be a Chunin." Tsunade went on. "As they approach Konoha, they attack other villages in the Fire Country. We know where they're going to strike next. I've summoned you all because we intend to send a large group of shinobi to intercept Akatsuki at their next target. This is a risky mission because we don't know how many of them there are or how strong they are. We have reason to believe they are led by Orochimaru as well." The crowd murmured, and Tsunade held up a hand to quiet them. Sakura looked to Sasuke for a reaction, but with his mask on, she could only see his body language. And he hadn't even tensed when Tsunade made the announcement. He had to have known already. "Some of you," Tsunade admitted, "I will specifically request to go. Otherwise, we'll need volunteers. Because this isn't a class mission, no Chunins will be forced to participate. If you want to volunteer, please contact Hamura, Koharu, or Shizune. Because we cannot afford to leave Konoha unprotected, you may be asked to stay here. Discuss among yourselves, but please volunteer before you leave if you intend to." With that, the Hokage stepped down from the podium and made her way through the crowd, pausing to speak with various jounin along the way. Immediately, there was a buzz. Kiba pushed his way over to Shikamaru, and the others gathered around him as well. "What the hell is going on, Shikamaru?" Kiba inquired. Shikamaru sighed, rolling his eyes. "Kiba, why don't you listen? Tsunade-sama just explained everything." "Not that," Kiba clarified. "What happened the night before? And who exactly is he?" he said, jabbing his thumb over his shoulder at the masked man in the back of the room. Even Neji, Tenten, and Shino, who hadn't been at the pub the night before, and the older jounin, who had no idea what had happened, were waiting for Shikamaru's response. When a low voice spoke right next to Kiba, he nearly jumped out of his skin. "Neji, Tenten," Sasuke addressed his Anbu. "The Hokage has asked me to assemble an Anbu squad for this mission, and I'd like you two to be a part of it." Even when he was with people he'd known since childhood, he didn't bother taking off his mask. "Hi," Tenten said, and Neji nodded affirmatively. Without saying anything to the rest of them, Sasuke turned and walked away, disappearing back into the crowd. "Nice to see you as well, Uchiha," Kiba added. He turned to continue questioning Shikamaru, but was interrupted once more when Tsunade approached. "Kakashi, guy, I'd like the two of you to accompany me on the mission." They both nodded. "All right," she said. "Report to Shikamaru at 8 a.m. tomorrow." "Shikamaru?" Kakashi inquired. "Yes, he and Sasuke will be in charge of this mission. Shikamaru commands the jounin and any chunin who volunteer, while Sasuke looks after the Anbu." Dai and Kakashi exchanged glances as she walked away, telling Lee, Kiba, Shino, and Chaoji that she needed them on the mission. "Are you suddenly feeling very old?" Guy inquired. Kakashi nodded, glancing at their leader, who appeared to be watching his companions with little interest, if not boredom. Sakura, Ino, and Hinata returned to the group after volunteering. The room began to empty as those who had volunteered and those who had no intention of leaving left. Ino moved his gaze to the masked man, who leaned against the wall, arms folded and eyes closed. "I wonder if he'll volunteer." She wondered aloud to no one in particular. "Kakashi-sensei," Sakura addressed the silver-haired jounin standing near Guy. "Can you tell me anything about that guy?" Taking a look in his direction, Kakashi was startled to see blue eyes meet his gaze, but he showed no sign of surprise. "No, Sakura, I'm just as lost as you are." He made eye contact with the man for a brief moment before the blue eyes closed again. Everyone turned to Shikamaru, who had half-lidded eyes and appeared to be attempting to sleep standing up. "What?" he asked, noticing all eyes on him. "You were talking to him," Ino pointed out. "Do you recognize him?" Shikamaru shook his head. "We got together." When Sasuke walked back up to the group, everyone, including the older generation of Jounin who were equally as curious about the stranger, was about to ask questions. "Ready?" Sasuke inquired, as if he didn't care one way or the other. The question caused some consternation because, for one thing, Sasuke rarely spoke to any of them, and, for another, his mask prevented them from seeing where exactly his question was directed. Shikamaru sighed and said, "How troublesome," before following Sasuke over to the masked man. He pushed himself away from the wall and gave them a curt nod before they left, completely ignoring the rest of them. "Okay, seriously," Kiba said after they had left. "What in the world is going on?" Akamaru yipped. "What brings you here, old man?" Naruto inquired. They were at the back of a long line of shinobi. The mission had been assigned to about 50 ninjas, and they were making their way quickly towards the village Gamakichi had warned Naruto about. Naruto sighed, reflecting on how much faster he could have gotten there if he'd gone himself. Jiraiya gave him an irritated look when he asked the question. "I'm not one to pass up an opportunity to kick Orochimaru in the shins." Naruto's expression was thoughtful. "I don't recall you ever kicking Orochimaru in the shins. In fact, every time I've seen you confront him, you've turned into a human crater." Jiraiya smacked him across the head. "There is no respect." Naruto's eyes crinkled in a grin, but the smile faded when he noticed more eyes on him. Looking ahead, he noticed a pair of pale, pupil-less eyes staring at him in the middle of the line. Hinata blushed and turned quickly when he met her gaze. Naruto exhaled a sigh. At the very least, she hadn't been employing Byakugan. Who knew what she'd see? People had been sneaking glances at him since the mission began, as if watching him would help them solve the mystery he presented. He'd seen everyone from Ino to Kakashi. He was pretty sure he'd even seen the stoic Shino watching him as well. But it was difficult to tell with the sunglasses on. "Aren't we well known?" Jiraiya made a joke. "If I had known that the best way to get everyone's attention was to be as quiet and unobtrusive as possible, I wouldn't have tried being so annoying as a kid," Naruto grumbled. Jiraiya burst out laughing. "The mask," he explained. "It adds to the enigma." Naruto shook his head. Sasuke appeared beside them out of nowhere. He was dressed in armor and a mask, with his katana strapped across his back. Sasuke's blue eyes rolled as he fell into step with them. "I'm still here, Sasuke," Naruto said, clearly annoyed. "I understand," Anbu replied. This wasn't the first time Sasuke had inquired about him. Naruto wasn't sure if Sasuke was afraid he'd run away or try to kill himself on the way to the village, but it was starting to irritate him. "Stop playing mother hen and get back to your troops," Naruto yelled a little too loudly. The fox mask turned to face him, but Naruto had no idea what expression it concealed. Sasuke finally grunted and vanished, presumably returning to the front of the line with the rest of the Anbu. Those who could hear the discussion were wide-eyed. No one dared to say such a thing to the Anbu captain, not even those who had known him when he was younger. Kakashi and Guy, who had remained at the back of the line, exchanged glances. Their interest peaked. When he leaned back, his weight was on his arms as he gazed up into the night sky. The metal roof tiles were cool under his hands. He could see several shinobi pacing the outskirts of the village on sentry duty, looking for any sign of Akatsuki from his perch on the roof of a bakery that had closed for the night. They'd arrived in the village just as the sun was setting. The villagers were taken aback but cooperative, grateful for the protection. They'd heard about what was going on in the other villages. So far, everything has been quiet. The villagers and the majority of the shinobi were sleeping and resting in preparation for the battle that would most likely begin the next day. Naruto had slipped away from the watchful gazes of Sasuke and Shikamaru. He and Sasuke hadn't spoken since the day before, with the exception of Naruto telling him to leave him alone several times on the way to the village. Shikamaru and Sasuke discussed strategies when they returned to Sasuke's house after the meeting, while Naruto went to the guest room to meditate. The entire house seemed to be filled with nearly tangible tension between Sasuke and Naruto after Shikamaru had left. Sasuke had obviously not expected to learn how little Naruto valued his life, and Naruto had not expected Sasuke's angry reaction to this information. He heard footsteps lightly land on the shingles behind him. He watched as Guy know. He corrected when the man's face was illuminated by the moonlight. Lee walked over to him, slightly turning his head. Lee spoke softly when he saw Naruto. His hair and face remained hidden, but he was now recognized as the mysterious masked man. "I apologize for disturbing you," Lee said, drawing even with him. I noticed a shadowy figure on the roof and thought I should investigate. It's all right, Naruto said, returning his gaze to the stars above them. My name is Rock Lee, the dark-haired man said as he extended his hand to him. Nice to meet you, Naruto said, taking Lee's calloused palm but not introducing himself. Lee made no comment when he realized he hadn't been given a name. So, he explained, how did you come to know Uchiha Sasuke? The Hokage is forcing me to remain with him. It wasn't a fabrication. Lee nodded and gazed up at the stars. I can't imagine he's a lot of fun to live with, he admitted. Naruto shook his head, a small smile tugging at his hidden lips. He's clearly a broody bastard. Lee gave him a sly grin. He's always been that way, he explained. Of course, he wasn't so bad before with a frown. He cut himself off. Naruto raised an eyebrow at him. What was it before? Well, he hasn't been the same since a friend of his died, Lee lamented. In reality, none of us have. Konoha had never seemed so quiet until he left. Naruto looked down at the roof tiles, his stomach sinking. His friends had been missing him. He'd often wondered if that would be the case, or if his absence would go largely unnoticed, having no impact on anyone's lives. He wished he could talk to them the way he used to, just be the careless idiot he used to be, annoying his friends. He gave a slight shake of his head. He'd made the correct decision. He was protecting these people, and they had no idea he was still alive. He had no qualms. He'd already spent far too much time with them. Any moment with him was dangerous, whether they knew it or not. His determination grew stronger. He'd leave after this mission, with or without Tsunade permission, Baba's or Sasuke's knowledge. Well, Lee interrupted Naruto's train of thought. I think I should go back to sentry duty. Naruto nodded, and the green-clad man leapt from the roof, landing gracefully on the ground and making his way back through the village. It took a few moments for Naruto to notice the presence he had sensed while speaking with Lee. Are you hiding from your old friends, Naruto-kun? Naruto sighed and turned to face the newcomer. Naruto frowned as he observed the white-haired man's appearance. His skin was pulled taut over his face, giving him an emaciated appearance. He no longer wore his glasses, and his eyes bulged out of his face unnaturally. Kabuto, the years have not been kind to you, Naruto said. Or perhaps I should refer to you as Orochimaru. Kabuto's face erupted in a maniacal grin. Yes, when Sasuke-kun rebelled, Kabuto was kind enough to lend me his body. Are you here to get him back? Naruto inquired, his arms crossed across his chest. No, said Orochimaru. I used to think he was the body I wanted, but I've since changed my mind. Naruto stood there guardedly watching him speak. See, I always imagined you as a little Jiraiya, stupid and untalented. He paused, expecting Naruto to react, but continued when Naruto simply stared at him. However, Jiraiya has demonstrated that luck and perseverance can make you strong. Your luck, Naruto-kun, was having Kyuubi sealed in you. You have unlimited power at your disposal. Naruto raised an eyebrow in response. Orochimaru could not possibly be implying what he appeared to be implying. Coming after you was a good idea for Uchiha Itachi. Your stupidity previously caused me to overlook you, but once I have control of your body, that particular weakness will no longer be an issue, and I'll have Kyuubi's power to use as I please. Apparently, Orochimaru was suggesting exactly what he seemed to be suggesting. Naruto reasoned. How do you know you can control Kyuubi's power? Naruto inquired. Laughed Orochimaru. Are you aware of who you're speaking to? He rolled his eyes. An overconfident bastard, muttered Naruto. He said louder. There's only one problem with your theory. I'd have to be open to it, and neither am I. Orochimaru laughed again, causing Naruto to clench his teeth. Yes, you would have had to be willing 10 years ago, but since then, I've discovered a new jutsu. You only need to be unconscious now. As Kabuto's mouth opened and Orochimaru's tongue flew from his mouth, Naruto's eyes widened. He ducked quickly, but the tongue followed. To avoid being hit, he had to run at full speed. He dashed across the rooftop, pulling out several shuriken and hurling them at Orochimaru, who leapt into the air to avoid them. Naruto took advantage of the opportunity to get close, avoiding the tongue. Chakra started to form in his right palm. Oh no, you don't, Orochimaru said, recognizing the trick. He retracted his tongue quickly, slamming it into the back of Naruto's head. Stars flashed in front of his eyes, and Naruto knelt in front of the snake-like man, the chakra in his hand vanishing. Orochimaru smirked and quickly raised his knee, catching Naruto in the jaw and sending him sprawling across the roof. Naruto shakily rose to his feet after briefly removing his mask to spit out blood. Orochimaru's kick to the ribs sent him sliding along the roof tiles, dangerously close to the edge. He could see the tongue speeding towards him but couldn't avoid it as it wrapped around his leg, pulling him upside down into the air. Lee felt a strong chakra gathering and turned to see the masked man he'd just left fighting with a strange man on the roof he'd just left. He and several sentries rushed towards the fight, calling to a nearby Chunin to inform Shikamaru and Sasuke. They arrived just in time to see the masked man lifted into the air by the other's impossibly and disgustingly long tongue. Lee watched as the man threw the masked man off the roof with his tongue. He landed painfully hard on the ground and rolled towards Lee before the momentum of the throw wore out, and his limp body skidded to a halt. Lee ran up to him and knelt to make sure he was still alive. The man's face was bloodied and bruised where he could see it, and his arm was bent in an unnatural way, presumably from the fall. He was awake but unconscious. "Get a medical nin," Lee instructed one of the sentries, who bolted. 2 puffs of smoke signaled the arrival of Sasuke and Shikamaru, who assessed the situation quickly. Sasuke quickly kneeled next to the masked man who was lying on the ground, across from Lee. Sasuke hadn't bothered to put on his mask, and Lee was taken aback by the worried expression on the normally stoic man's face. Assuring himself that he was still alive, Sasuke stood up and glared angrily at the man on the roof. "Ah, Sasuke-kun," said the man, just in time to witness my known body being taken. When he recognized Orochimaru's voice, Sasuke's eyes widened as the white-haired man began making seals. He didn't know what to do to protect Naruto, but he'd be damned if he let that snake control him like he'd been controlled. But before Sasuke could react, Orochimaru opened his eyes and laughed. "You're better than I thought," he said, looking at Naruto's still form. "I'll do it the next time we meet." And with that, he was gone. The unconscious man on the ground piqued the interest of Sasuke, Shikamaru, Lee, and the 3 other sentries. Sasuke returned to his knees by Naruto's side. What exactly did Orochimaru mean? Naruto did not appear to be a threat. The sentry Lee had dispatched appeared with a poof, Sakura accompanying him. Her pink hair was sticking out in all directions after being roused from sleep. She noticed Sasuke kneeling next to the masked man and dashed to the injured man's side, shoving Sasuke away to make room for her to work. She moved quickly to use her chakra to begin healing after quickly assessing the damage, and nearly screamed when her patient vanished in a puff of smoke. They were all taken aback by the empty spot. "Don't waste your chakra," said a voice. They turned to see the masked man emerge from the shadow of the building where the fight had occurred, looking no more injured than when Lee spoke to him. "What is the replacement technique?" Lee was perplexed. "No," Sakura replied, looking around at the empty space in front of her. If it had been a regular forgery, she would have recognized it. She'd sensed chakra in the clone in front of her. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," he says. "Who is this person?" Sakura snarled, pointing to Naruto, who sat at the head of a long rectangular table. They had moved to the meeting room provided by the inn after Orochimaru had gone missing. Lee stood next to Sakura, a calming hand on her arm, curiously looking between Sasuke, who stood silently behind Naruto, his Anbu mask hanging from his hip instead of covering his face, and Shikamaru, who sat a few seats away from Naruto, his cheek resting on his palm. Sakura went on. "He claimed to be a Chunin, but he could hold a Kage Bunshin long enough for the clone to be injured. That is extremely difficult. How did he learn the technique in the first place? It's against the rules. No Chunin should be able to pull it off." "Sakura, we did know a shinobi who could use Kage Bunshin as a genin," Lee reminded her, oblivious to the other 3 men in the room shifting subtly in response to his words. "This is unique, Lee." Naruto was dependable. Naruto was torn between being pleased that she thought so highly of him and offended that she didn't trust the current him. It was strange to be complimented and insulted in the same sentence. The room was deafeningly quiet. Naruto was rarely mentioned, even among those closest to him. It was a wound that had never fully healed. There was also an unspoken agreement that the subject would never be broached in front of Sasuke, and Lee and Sakura were now watching him warily for a reaction. Shikamaru might have been concerned if he hadn't realized Naruto was sitting in front of Sasuke, puzzled by the sudden silence. Shikamaru finally said something. "Sakura," he explained, "Tsunade, Jiraiya, Sasuke, and I have complete faith in him. There is no cause for concern. Shikamaru is aware of a forbidden jutsu. Also, recall what Ino said. Can everyone please stop talking about me as if I'm not right here?" Naruto interjected, his brow furrowed. Everyone's attention was drawn to him. He had his gaze fixed on Sakura. "I told you I was a Chunin," he explained. "I've never taken the Jounin exam, so I can't say I'm one, but my skills are probably Jounin level." "Then why didn't you tell us that right away?" Sakura insisted. "Because the way you and Ino talk, It's impossible to say anything, Naruto exclaimed in frustration. For a brief moment, the room fell silent as Naruto rolled his eyes and the other 3 men in the room waited for Sakura's response with bated breath. She was sensitive to criticism. "Who the hell do you think you are?" she yelled as she lunged for him. Naruto, for his part, did not even flinch. Lee was able to apprehend her before she could get anywhere. Shikamaru groaned. Women were so difficult. "At the very least, we know Orochimaru is alive." Sakura calmed down, Shikamaru added, looking at Naruto. "And what he's after." Naruto took a stand. "Are we finished? I'm going to sleep." Shikamaru looked thoughtful before nodding. It was getting close to dawn. He didn't want several of his most capable companions to be tired. "You may proceed." He turned to face the rest of the shinobi in the room and said, "You should all get some rest as well. Because Orochimaru is nearby, the battle could start at any time." Sakura walked away from Naruto in a huff, Lee trailing behind her after smiling at them. Sasuke stood there watching as Naruto walked away without saying anything. He trailed Shikamaru after saying a quick goodbye. Naruto had stated that he was going to bed, but Sasuke knew that couldn't be right, and there were issues they needed to discuss. The silent treatment had lasted far too long. Before entering Naruto's room, Sasuke only gave a brief knock. It was exactly like his own room down the hall. There was a bed in the center, a nightstand next to it, 1 chair, and a set of dressers against the far wall. The room was dark, and Sasuke almost assumed Naruto hadn't returned until he noticed a light in the corner where the bathroom door was slightly ajar. He set his katana near the door, his mask resting on the hilt. "Naruto?" he asked, pushing open the door. Naruto was hunched over the sink, his back to the door. Sasuke heard him spit before straightening up and ignoring him. He wiped his mouth, then sipped from the glass of water in his hand, sloshing it around his mouth with a grimace before leaning over and spitting once more. Sasuke noticed the red tint the water had as it disappeared into the sink this time. Naruto straightened up again, not turning, but meeting Sasuke's gaze in the sink mirror. "Have you never heard of knocking?" he asked. "Are you injured?" Sasuke inquired, completely disregarding his question. "When Orochimaru kneed me in the jaw, I bit my tongue," Naruto shrugged, taking another mouthful of water. "I assumed it was a clone," Sasuke said. "No," Naruto said after spitting once more. "I didn't get to Cage Bunshin until the jerk nearly knocked me off the roof." He was so pleased with himself that he didn't notice the real me slipping down the stairs. "You should have told Sakura about your injury. She could have healed you." "And I took off my mask, discovered who I am, fainted, recovered, and told everyone within a 20-mile radius." Naruto explained. "With the glass of water, I'll take my chances. After all, it'll be healed in a few hours." Sasuke frowned at the mention of Kyuubi. He backed out of the bathroom as Naruto approached, leaving the cup on the sink. Sasuke stood there watching as he walked to the bed, flopped down on his back and draped an arm over his eyes. "Oh, what I wouldn't give to sleep," he murmured, his voice so low that Sasuke almost missed it. The raven-haired man was filled with rage at the fox. Naruto should not have had to deal with this. Nobody should be forced to. It's no surprise Naruto was thinking about. "Naruto?" Sasuke inquired. His response was it tired him. Sasuke wasn't sure he wanted to bring this up, but he did so anyway. "When you said you were going to face Akatsuki alone the other day," Sasuke fumbled for words, and Naruto sat up, patiently waiting for him to speak. It was unusual to see the other man so flustered, and Naruto smirked slightly as Sasuke struggled to find the right words. Do you truly want to?" Naruto decided to put Sasuke out of his misery after he stopped looking uncomfortable. He understood what Sasuke was asking. "Yes," he said, looking Sasuke in the eyes. "I'd like to die." Sasuke inhaled deeply. He hadn't expected such a direct response. "But, Sasuke, since I was 17, I haven't slept for more than an hour at a time. Any normal man would have died long ago. I would have died of exhaustion if Kyuubi hadn't refused to let me. I'm slowly losing myself to a demon who, if given the chance, will kill everything in its path. I avoid human contact because I'm afraid people will find out I'm alive. I've only ever had company from frogs, and even that is unusual. Everyone I know believes I've died. Do you have any idea how tired, miserable, and lonely my life is? I can't even imagine how much relief I'd feel if I died." "I know you're alive," Sasuke said angrily. "Isn't that sufficient?" He'd been through the loss of a friend before, but the thought of going through it again was unfathomable. "You shouldn't be aware that I'm still alive, Sasuke. It is not safe for anyone to find out. That's why I decided to leave in the first place. I can defend myself. Don't make me look helpless. Who are you to claim that we don't know you're alive?" Sasuke became enraged. What gives you the authority to make that decision for us? No one can defend themselves against this, Naruto said. This is no ordinary shinobi. Kyuubi is my name. But that isn't the point. You should give us a choice. Are you afraid we'll leave you alone? Is that why you fled? No, Naruto said quietly. I was terrified that people would choose to stay with me for some stupid, stubborn reason. I can't bear the thought of those close to me dying at my hands. I'm not going to do it. Sasuke remained silent. They hadn't realized it yet, but the morning sun had started to peek through the window. When there was a knock on the door, Sasuke went to answer it, grateful for the distraction. Neji was fully dressed, including his mask, and stood in the hall. They're coming, he simply stated. The news immediately brought Sasuke to his senses. Does Shikamaru know? Neji gave a nod. He's now outside. Get the rest of the Anbu together. We'll meet outside in 5 minutes. Hi, Neji said before walking away. Sasuke shut the door and turned to face Naruto, his mask back on. Naruto shook his head. Duty demands. Sasuke took his fox mask and katana from their positions against the wall and secured them. Let's get this over with, he said. Shikamaru turned to face the village hill, grimacing as figure after figure appeared atop it, silently staring down at them. They had known Akatsuki were increasing in number, but none of them had anticipated by this much. Shikamaru had some of Konoha's best ninjas on his side, but being outnumbered by what he estimated to be 15-1 was not a good sign. Konoha ninjas gathered at the bottom of the hill, gazing up at the vast number of shinobi above them. Shikamaru's men had been dispatched to warn the villagers, leading them away from the battleground. Jiraiya appeared next to Shikamaru, nodding to the younger man. He could see several other shinobi to his left, including Kakashi and Guy, as well as Lee, Sakura, and Ino. On his right, Choji, Kiba, Shino, and Hinata stood in various positions. Shikamaru began to gain confidence with a small smile. He would put his life in the hands of any of these ninjas. He could think of no greater honor than fighting alongside them. With a puff of smoke, Sasuke and Naruto appeared in front of him, followed by Tenten, Neji, and 2 other Anbu. They smiled at Shikamaru before turning to survey the enemy. You know, Sasuke, Naruto pointed out. When Itachi was in charge, I think I liked Akatsuki more. They were less destructive, more focused on their goals, and, most importantly, much smaller. The Konoha shinobi hadn't been speaking, but the masked man's words broke the tension. Even those who had never met Sasuke were aware of Itachi, and the destructive means to which Sasuke had resorted in his quest for vengeance. They waited for Sasuke's response with bated breath, wondering if this masked shinobi would be the first to fall today. The white fox mask slowly turned to face the blue-eyed man, who fixed his gaze on the wooden face. When this is over, I'm going to beat the shit out of you, the voice from behind the mask said. Twinkles twinkled in the blue eyes. Promise? Yes. Several shinobi sighed in relief, while others shivered at the prospect of Uchiha Sasuke's wrath. Only a few people saw the meaning behind the words. Jiraiya and Shikamaru, who knew their history, Kakashi and Guy, who understood friendly rivalry, and, of course, Naruto and Sasuke. We're both going to make it through this. Promise? Yes. The top of the hill shifted, and Orochimaru in Kabuto's body appeared, standing comfortably on the head of a massive snake. After you've seen it so many times, the flashy snake entrance isn't quite as intimidating, Naruto said quietly, rolling his eyes. Sasuke agreed with a nod. Konoha ninjas, Shikamaru said loudly enough for everyone under his command to hear. Our mission is to protect this village and to stop Akatsuki at any cost. What we do today safeguards Konoha. If we fail, this army will march on our village. Konoha must be protected. The shinobi behind him let out a loud agreement cry. Orochimaru laughed, his arms folded across his chest. The shinobi at the top of the hill began charging with a simple nod to his subordinates. The ninja of Konoha prepared for battle by arming themselves with kunai, shuriken, and other weapons. Sasuke and the 4 Anbu behind him drew their katanas from behind them. Naruto noticed that Neji and Tenten's weapons were different from those of their comrades. Tenten wielded 2 shorter katana than the others, while Neji wielded a long dagger. She quickly moved to the right flank, followed by Neji, after spinning them once to get a firm grip on them. Sasuke and Naruto were in the middle as the other 2 Anbu moved to the left. Naruto had never seen Sasuke use a katana before, but he was not surprised by the fluidity and grace with which he moved as the first of the enemy approached and was instantly struck down. Sasuke stabbed one Akatsuki member before twisting the katana from the man's abdomen and striking another. Naruto didn't have time to admire Sasuke's abilities for long because the Akatsuki had descended upon him in such numbers that his attention had to be focused on his own battles. Fortunately, Naruto noticed as he ducked a punch aimed at his jaw that the prestige that members of the Akatsuki used to have did not seem to apply to them any longer. These were not S-class ninjas. Many of them weren't even reporters. Orochimaru appeared to be aiming for numerical superiority. The shinobi attacking Naruto fell face first into the grass after a swift blow to the head with the blunt end of his kunai. Naruto felt rather than saw the kick coming from behind him and quickly turned to grab the attacker's ankle. He broke the other man's leg at the joint with a sharp downward thrust of his elbow. Naruto let him go, and he toppled over, clutching desperately at his knee. His cries joining the yells and screams of others on the battlefield turned hill. Naruto leaped into the air to avoid two kunai that were thrown at him, and they embedded into the ground with soft thunks. A fist appeared out of nowhere and he blocked it, punching his attacker in the stomach. Shinobi began charging him in groups of 2. This was hilarious. When one was killed, 3 more would take his place. With a quick glance around, he noticed that Kanoha's already small force was rapidly dwindling. Sakura, like several other medical nins, had given up fighting and was now tending to the injured on their side. The Anbu were doing well. Their swords allowed them to easily kill many enemies, and close-range combat was their specialty. Neji could easily maneuver his dagger, getting close to his enemies and cutting off their chakra flow or limbs with his free hand or dagger. Naruto frowned as he noticed a man on his knees in front of Tenten, completely still. Her blades were crossed in front of his throat. Pulling her arms apart quickly, she sliced open the man's neck, blood splattering across her white mask. Naruto's attention was drawn to a flash of pink as Sakura ran to Kiba, who had just killed several sword-wielding Akatsuki members but had suffered a deep wound in his leg as a result. Naruto turned to face Sasuke, who appeared to be struggling with the never-ending onslaught of enemies. No matter how many people were killed, more came. More fighters were required. They couldn't possibly win at this rate. He gritted his teeth and tossed a kunai into the heart of an advancing attacker. This would almost certainly blow his cover. He had no doubt that someone, if not everyone, would figure him out with Kakashi's Sharingan, the Hyuga's Byakugan, Kiba's nose, and Sakura's intelligence. But what was the point of shielding them from himself if they were to die in battle? Raising his hands, he crossed 2 of his right hand's fingers vertically over 2 of his left. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, says one. He could hear the fighting stop as both allies and enemies looked around in awe at the hundreds of masked figures that had appeared in the fray. The Narutos began to attack, taking advantage of the confusion. The Konoha ninjas recovered from their surprise and resumed their fight with renewed zeal. However, several shinobi struggled to refocus on the battle because they now knew who the masked man was.
I will continue the story in next part, so turn on the bell notification so you never miss an upload. Till then, we weeb offline.